Morning. Today is Tuesday, the 23rd day of Shevat. And we finished the 23rd chapter today in Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe spoke about the greatness of the study of the Torah, and that even compared to doing mitzvahs, the unity that is achieved through study of Torah is a much greater unity. That we explained yesterday. Yes, that Hashem is on earth more than he is on the higher worlds. Why? Because in the Torah is the will of God. The ultimate, very essence of God is in the Torah, because that's his will. He and his will is one. So when we study the Torah, we become one with Hashem himself. Unlike when you do a mitzvah, you fulfill God's will, you become nullified to Hashem, but it's not becoming one. But when you study the Torah, especially when you understand the meaning of the unity that is achieved through study the Torah, then you become one with Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe continues today, in today's lesson, to explain that the idea of the fear of God, the awe that a person is able to reach. Later on in Tanya, he will explain that there is two levels of Yirat Hashem. Fear of Hashem has two levels. There is the lower level of fear and the higher level of fear. And there is the Mishnah says that im ein yira ein chachma. If there is no fear, there is no wisdom. Wisdom, we're talking about the wisdom of the Torah. But then there is another statement that says the opposite. Im ein chachma ein yira. If there is no wisdom, there is no fear. So the question is, what leads to what? Does fear lead to chachma, to wisdom, or does the chachma lead to yira? And the answer is that there are two types of yira. There is the lower level of yira, the lower level of fear of Hashem, that leads to chachma, that leads to study of the Torah. And there is the higher level of fear of Hashem, that chachma leads to that level. The Torah learning leads to the higher level of fear of Hashem. So what does that mean? What is the lower level of fear? What is the higher level of fear? So the lower level of fear, we can use perhaps an example. When you have, in the time when you have a king, people are afraid of a king. You're fearful of the king. Why? So you have a king of a small country, and then you have a king of a very big country, a large country. Which king are you more fearful from? Obviously the king from the large country. The larger country is more powerful, has a bigger army. So the fear of the king of the larger country is bigger. But why is the king of the larger country, why is he more powerful? Because there's more people there. So in other words, you're fearful from the king because it's made out of many people. So in that level of fear, that's called the lower level of fear, because the fear comes from the lower elements. It comes from you, from the people. So it's not that you will be nullified. You cannot be nullified completely to the king, because the greatness of the king is What makes him great? The fact that he has many people, which you are one of them. So if you are nullified completely, then the king is also nullified. So this is called the Yirat Torah. This is the same thing when we're thinking about Hashem. Thinking about Hashem, how great the greatness of the heaven and the earth and everything, all this majesty of God, that it gives you a deep feeling of fear and awe of Hashem. But all of this is from something that comes from below. The higher level of fear is when we're talking about the fear from the king himself. That is not, it's not that is something that he became powerful because of the people. When you recognize the greatness of the king himself, the true king, like in the time it says the king Saul, Shaul HaMelech, it says, Mishichmo ulemala gavoa mekol am. He was a shoulder higher than the rest of the people, which is not only describing his physical height, be the best basketball player, but it means the spiritual height, that his shoulder was higher than the heads of the people. He was in a higher, much higher level. When you focus on the greatness of a king, just like, for example, you're in the presence of a tzaddik, a holy man, what makes the tzaddik, the Rebbe, what makes him great, what makes him holy? It's not because he's a Rebbe of many people, or many Hasidim, is a tzaddik of, it's him himself is totally in a higher, much higher level. So using this example for the Yirat Hashem, for the fear of Hashem. So the lower level of fear is when it comes from the contemplation and the thinking and understanding of the greatness of what God created the world, the universe, and all the great things in this world. That leads to the lower level of fear. The higher level of fear is when you recognize that everything else does not exist. The entire world doesn't exist. And Hashem himself is above everything. The whole world is Ein ve'efes. And yet, as we explained yesterday, Hashem put himself into the Torah that we learn. That level of godliness, which is we call it the Soivev Kol Almin, the encompassing light of Hashem, that level of godliness that cannot be clothed in the world, not in the physical world, and not even in the spiritual worlds. This is the greatness of Hashem. And yet, when you study Torah, you become one with that level of godliness. This is the fear that comes after understanding, learning Torah with the understanding what is achieved, the unity that is achieved while you study the Torah. So let's see inside how the Alter Rebbe explains this. Says the Alter Rebbe, Umizeh yuchal hamaskil lehamshich olav yira gedola beoske b'Torah. From this explanation of the lofty stature of Torah study, the wise man will be able to draw upon himself a sense of great awe as he engages in the study of the Torah. And how's that? When he considers how his soul and its garments of thoughts and speech that are found in his brain and his mouth are truly fused in perfect unity with the divine will and the infinite light of Ein Sof that is manifest in them, meaning in the soul and its garment when he studies the Torah. So when you think about this, what is happening now? That your soul, the garments of the soul, which is the speech, the thoughts, become united with the will of Hashem. And this infinite light manifests in one's Torah study is of such a lofty level that all the upper and lower worlds are truly as naught in comparison with it, and are in fact as absolutely nothing at all. That's what we said before. This light, all the entire world is not existing at all compared to this light of Hashem. And the only way it is connected with the world is only in an encompassing way. Elo soivev kol almin b'chinas makif lachayosam ikachayusam rak eizu ha'orem mislabeshes b'toichem asher yecholim lisbosh lo yizbatlu b'metzius legamre. So much so, it says that they can only bear to have a minute glow of it clothed in them without their reverting to nothingness altogether. If it would be more than just a minute glow from a light of Hashem, they will be completely nullified. That's how powerful it is. Their main life force, which they receive from it, however, is not clothed within them, but animates them from the outside, so to speak, in a transcendent, encompassing manner. Because otherwise, they will be nullified. And this light that is so powerful, so intense, is clothed itself with us, in our thoughts and speech, when we study the Torah. That is what it says, that this will lead to the greater level of awe of Hashem. When you recognize this, that a great level of godliness is revealed within you, which the whole entire world is nothing compared to that. And this explains also an interesting verse in the Torah, says the Alter Rebbe. V'zeu shekasav, vayetzavenu Hashem es kol hachukim ha'ele, leyira es Hashem v'gomer. This is the meaning of the verse. And God commanded us to fulfill all these statutes in order to fear God. So you see, according to this verse, observing the mitzvahs would appear to be the first step. And this leads to the fear of God. Logically, however, the performance of God's commandments would seem to be a result of one's fear of Him and not vice versa. Alter Rebbe therefore explains that the above verse speaks of a higher level of awe than that which is a prerequisite for performing the commandments. This level can only be attained as a result of one's observance of the commandments. So again, this is when it says Veitzavenu Hashem, that God commanded us all of these laws to do, is to what? Layirat Hashem, to fear Hashem. That means that this is the higher level of fear, the level of fear that comes after the observing of the commandments, after the studying of the Torah. And this Alter Rebbe explains the question that we asked in the beginning about the two statements that it says in the Mishnah, which seems to be contradictory. Regarding this great fear, our sages said, if there is no wisdom, there is no fear. In the beginning, it says, Imen yira ein chachma. If there is no fear, there is no wisdom. That is talking about the lower wisdom. In order to be able to serve Hashem, to study Torah, you need to have the fear of Hashem, the basic fear. But then once you have the understanding and you study the Torah and you understand the depth of the unity, what level of unity you achieve through the study of the Torah, that leads you to a higher level of fear. In this context, it says wisdom represents Torah study and fear, a higher level of the awe of God, which can be reached only by way of the Torah. By contrast, the statement, if there is no fear, there is no wisdom, refers to the lower level of fear, which is a prerequisite for the Torah study, as stated above. V'Torah nikres etzlo, taro ledarto, k'moshe nisbar b'mokei macha. Now, compared in regards to this level of, in relation to this level of fear, the Torah is called a gateway to the courtyard. Meaning, the sole means of entering the courtyard, meaning the higher level of fear, as explained elsewhere. So the Torah is just like a gateway to lead to this level of fear. However, says the Alter Rebbe, the lav kol moichos avildo yirkazu. Not every mind, however, can sustain such a fear, but not everyone and every person can reach the understanding of this level of and achieve such a great fear of Hashem. Nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, this will be explained elsewhere, that even if a person cannot achieve this fear, that does not stop the person from doing the mitzvahs in a proper way. Says the Alter Rebbe, "Gam man de lo sovil moiche klal yirazu loy minaim veloy mikzaso." Yet, even he, whose mind cannot bear such a fear, nor even a minute part of it, because the root, because the root and source of his soul derives from an inferior level. The madrega is tachtoino, is the esa sphira, is the atzilus, the lower gradation of the 10 spheres of the world of the Asiya, the world of Asiya. Ein yirazu, nevertheless, is the Alter Rebbe, ein yirazu ma'akevas boile maise. Even he should not be deterred from the actual performance of the Torah and the mitzvahs. K'moshe is ba'al kaman, for want of this fear, as will be explained further. This the Alter Rebbe will explain later on in chapter 41. Alter Rebbe will explain how also even people that cannot achieve this level of fear, they have the ability of achieving their own level of true service of Hashem, and that should not stop them from doing the Torah and the mitzvahs. So what we learned today, this is the end of the chapter 23, is again about the greatness of the Torah study, and that the Torah study leads you to the greater level of fear of Hashem. Why? Because when we understand the unity that is achieved through the Torah study, that Hashem, the very essence of Hashem is in the Torah, because the will of Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem is one with God, is one with Hashem himself, and that is in the Torah. So when you study the Torah, you're able to achieve that higher level of fear, the fear of Hashem, which is called the Yira Illah. So this is the end of today's shir. Thank you for joining. Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a long shir. We're going to learn the entire chapter 24. So get ready. Any questions?